Welcome to another episode of Meaningful Live. As we approach Passover, we'll be speaking about the 15 steps in 15 minutes. I'll explain. This program is dedicated by Todor Georgiev, honoring the life of all the captives before Hashem to be reunited with their families. Amen. So we're talking about now a 3,336 year time-tested blueprint for freedom. Everybody's seeking some form of transcendence, some way of getting out of their limitations, their constraints, their fears, their insecurities, whether they be emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical. Remember, freedom is not just that you're not behind bars and not bound by ball and chain and shackles. A person could be free to move about, but they can be trapped in so many different ways. Consider technology today. On one hand, it's meant to emancipate us, free us, to be able to access all information anytime, anywhere, any person, any location. And yet, how many of us are complaining that we feel trapped, we feel addicted to our gadgets? We live in times of freedom in so many ways, and yet addiction is unprecedented. Whether it's drug or alcohol, whether it's sex addictions, whether it's other forms of enslavement. And everybody knows in their heart and soul our own trappings. So this is a time of year when we have special energy. All year round, we should be working on it. But especially now, the Festival of Freedom is about finding ways to get beyond those shackles, whatever form they take. And indeed, as I said, we're talking about over 3 millennia proven method of 15 steps, called a 15-step guide to freedom. This is called the Seder. We call it the Passover Seder, which we follow Haggadah. Haggadah means to relate, to tell the story. And indeed, we go through these steps throughout the evening, and we do it 2 evenings when it's outside of Israel. So I thought appropriate, just to give a little taste of it, to go through the 15 steps, and so hence 15 steps in 15 minutes. Now, as an added bonus, if you'd like to see these steps in writing, just go out to meaningfullife.com and you can find them in more detail, print it out, use it as a companion to your Seder. And frankly, this is also universal for all peoples of all backgrounds, no matter where you come from, no matter what your belief system is. This is relevant personally to everyone. So let's begin. Go straight to it, the 15 steps. I'm looking here at a card that we actually printed, a laminated card that has been used as a companion by many and has helped them tremendously going through the steps. It's not the technical part, but I'll talk about that. It's the spiritual, the psychological, the mindset, the heart set, the soul set, if you wish. How we affect our cognitive, emotional, and behavioral conditioning. So you may be familiar with the song, and we'll begin with that many people sing at the beginning of a Seder that actually spells out these 15 steps. And it goes like this. Kadesh urchatz, karpas yachatz, magid, rochza, moitzi matza, morar koirach, shulchan oirach, tzofan beirach, halel nirtzah. Those are 15 Hebrew words, which I will now enumerate and translate and explain in detail and try to capture it all in a very short time so you have a quick blueprint, a quick map of how to achieve transcendence and freedom. Kadesh. That's reciting the Kiddush on the wine, which opens up every Seder. Literally the word is Kadesh, that means to separate, to divide, to separate. And what are we doing? We begin by making a blessing over wine to sanctify, and we sanctify the wine to separate, referring to the separation between the holy and the profane, which means any type of movement, any growth always requires that you move away from the past. You'll see requiring space, requiring focus. As long as you're still carrying yesterday's baggage, as much as your intentions are good, you're just too much weight on you. So Kaddish is a type of transition that says, we're beginning a new evening now, a new holiday, a new year, a new freedom. Let's put aside everything else. And we do so by actually sanctifying wine. Wine is a symbol of aggression and strength, but we sanctify it, we sublimate it. So the first step is literally separate, getting yourself into a new space, and all worries of yesterday, all your constraints, and all those limitations and everything I mentioned before, just put aside. We understand they're not gone, but put aside and allow fresh air into your home, into your life. Step 2, urchatz, washing the hands. Here we wash our hands, and here we'll use the one word. Sanctify was the first, separate was the first, the second is to cleanse. Washing hands is symbolic of cleansing yourself and saying, okay, whatever my hands were dirty with. Hands are the main way we interact with the world around us. So it's very symbolic of a cleansing system. Another extension of the separation, but now you're making it very physical and you're actually feeling it. You're washing your hands. You're washing your hands of the past and saying, I'm now going to be taking, and we're going to come to step 3 in a moment, karpas, which is a vegetable that we're going to eat, and this process requires cleansing. So we move by also submerging ourselves in water, which cleanses our hands. This is a type of what we call like a mikvah. So there's a submergence, you submerge your entire being, but then on a more basic level, you submerge your hands, which again are the main tools, the main instruments that you use to interact with the world. So that submergence is, again, a form of purification. So your hands, why do we wash our hands? Your hands, you're doing something, fixing something, or cleaning something, and now you wash your hands. So the same thing is symbolically, we try to clean our hands and say, whatever my hands were involved in now, it's going to be involved in a experience of freedom. Taking us to step 3, karpas. Karpas literally means eating a vegetable which is dipped in salt water. Some people use an onion, some a potato. And what is this symbolic of? This is getting unstuck. So remember, these are not just traditions and rituals. These are actually meant to personalize them. So what's the significance of taking a vegetable which grows from the ground, from the earth, and dipping it in salt water? The vegetable represents the body and everything that's physical. The salt water represents something more sublime, like the salty tears. When a person cries, it's a form of cleansing. The Kabbalists say that tears cleanse the soul. They bathe and cleanse the soul. They're like a salve, a type of soothing. So whenever we have any emotional or painful expression, so what we're doing is we're taking our physicality, our very bodies, and we're submerging it in something that is salt water, that represents more of an emotional expression. Salt is a cleanser. Tears are an expression of the soul. We cleanse the body with the soul's tears. So this is really a moment of introspection, which again you can personalize and customize and tailor to your own needs. But the symbolism of it is that life is not static, and that you could take your physicality and do something with it by elevating it in this fashion. So we cleanse our bodies with our soul's tears, freeing ourselves from the illusion that the material world is the only reality. Remember, a big trap is we think our reality is the only one. And that's what we're showing. No. A type of submerging. Before we submerged our hands in the water, now we're submerging the physicality in the salt water. Coming to step 4. Step 4 is called yachatz. Yachatz means breaking the middle matzah. And here the key is open up. Open up. So far we've had separate, cleanse, get unstuck, open up. Matzah itself, we shall talk about more in the later steps, is a symbol of humility. That's why it's the bare minimum of flour and water without an inflating air, representing the Hebrew word bittul, humility, modesty, suspending yourself to experience something greater than yourself. When we break the matzah, is basically breaking the self. Now, I'm not breaking, God forbid, in a negative way, but basically saying, I'm ready to break a habit. I'm ready to break something. I'm not stuck in my comfort zone. The very fact that we eat matzah, which is so different than regular bread, is itself a shift. And all shifts and all growth happens when there are shifts. So the shift here, the break, is a type of breaking from the past, breaking from an old habit, breaking any addiction. And this is a critical step, therefore, in this whole process, the 15 steps of leading us to redemption. Step number 5, which really is the bulk of the Haggadah of the Seder, it's called Magid. Magid means reciting the Haggadah. It means to tell. It comes from the word Haggadah. Haggadah means to relate the story, tell the story. And here we'll describe it as being parameterized. What do we mean by that? Break the silence. Speak up. It's the story of our lives, whether the positives and the negatives, including the harsh and oppressive forces of our personal traumas and our personal pains and suffering. And a liberation begins by expressing it. That's why they say the silence is worse than the crime. Magid is saying, open up, speak about it, and share. What happens when a person does not speak? They bottle it up, it starts imploding within them, to the point that it becomes like normalized. A big part of abuse is when you hear people say, nothing happened. Don't make a big fuss about it. They start trying to convince you like that you imagined it. It's a total invalidation. Speaking, which begins with asking the questions, the 4 questions, is all about validation. It's about you're entitled to ask questions. You're entitled to speak, to share the story. And that's what we do. You'll see in all totalitarian regimes, the first step is to silence people. No, you can't talk about your problem. There is no problem. Control. Freedom is allowing yourself to speak. And that's what Magid is. And we encourage each other, our children we encourage to ask questions, to challenge, and to tell our story. And that's the first step in all freedom. So what you're doing is defining the very parameters of who you are and what you've gone through. And awareness of a problem is half the cure, and awareness is through expression. And this indeed also helps, because when you speak about it with people and you feel they're listening, that care and their listening is also a tremendous force in healing. So here goes the Haggadah. A big part is Magid. We tell the story. So yes, we read in Haggadah the story that happened back then in the Egyptian exile, but it's meant to be the story, our story. Personalize it. Make it engaging and personal to your life. Okay, that was the first 5 steps. Let's now go to the next. After Magid comes Rachza, step 6. We wash our hands again. The washing the hands, prepare. Washing hands, as I pointed out, is always a transition. Cleaning of the last day, cleaning out of the last stage in order to enter a new state. So here too, after these first 5 steps, we now want to go to the next level of transcendence. So we wash our hands. Once we've gotten through the first, we wash our hands again, and now we're ready to prepare for the next stage of spiritual growth, which is going to be the eating the matzah. And we take this new psychological mindset of freedom, if you successfully did the first 2 steps, and begin to actualize it in our material lives, which leads us to Moitzi and Matzah. It's 7 and 8, but it's 2 steps, but they go together, as you'll see. Moitzi is reciting the blessing of Hamotzi, the blessing of that we make before we eat anything that is like bread, in this case matzah. This is integrating. That's what a blessing is about. The process by integrating the spiritual and the material. Remember, so much part of the freedom is not to create a dissonance between our material lives and our spiritual lives. We dip the vegetable, the earth, into the salt water. We constantly looking to find ways to integrate. So here, the process is, by making the blessing, we say, Hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. It means we bless the one that has brought the lechem, bread, or grain from the earth. So it's essentially elevating our very materialism, the great potential that lies within everything. Like the verse says, not on bread alone does man live, but on the spark of the divine within the bread. And that's what the Hamotzi does. It's a focusing on the spirit within the material life, which is critical in all freedom, because where we get trapped is in materialism, is in the outer material, in the outer surface. And we want to access the spirit and the soul within. which leads us into matzah, because here the you're making the hamotzi in order to eat the matzah, but the matzah is now the process of actually eating, reciting the blessing, a second blessing on the matzah, and then eating the matzah, which this will call the level of faith. Matzah is faith. Eating matzah, the food of bittul, the food of humility like we described earlier, we assume its qualities. In other words, we're actually consuming something that is sublime, something that is humble, something that is greater than ourselves. So matzah is actually the symbol of transcendence, the symbol of that, and we're actually internalizing it, digesting it. So this is why it's called matzah, for that reason, because it is that type of power that allows us to internalize a higher type of experience. And essentially it is letting go and allowing yourself, suspending the existent and allowing yourself to experience something greater. Because as I pointed out earlier, matzah is the symbol of humility, whereas bread is the inflated ego. What is the opposite of an ego? Of an inflated ego is a humble person. This doesn't mean self-annihilation, God forbid. It means instead of focusing on the self, you're focusing on that which is greater than yourself. And if you think about it, the hamotzi that came right before it, to matzah, all feed into each other. They're all part of that higher experience. Experience transcendence, you have to do something to get there. As they say, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So all these steps are meant to create that type of shift and change, which leads us to step number 9, maror. Maror are eating the bitter herbs. This we'll call pain of growth. So most people think we eat the bitter herbs in order to have some taste of the pain that they had back in the time of Egyptian slavery. But let's be honest, is it comparable? But it's much deeper than that. It's teaching us that we should understand that to grow, there's always going to be some discomfort. That's the first step. It teaches us the process of growth is always going to be a process of discomfort and pain, because that's what means you're shifting, you're going out of your comfort zone to get to a greater place. You'll see anyone that experiences growth is always going to have some type of, we could say, vacuum or void in between. And often it is painful. And another point of maror is also empathy. We feel the empathy of others. And we feel the empathy. We're not just alone, we feel others in their pain. Now we take the maror, we dip it in sweet charosas. Charosas is like a mix, a paste of nuts, wine, and other items. People use different things, which becomes a paste that demonstrates that even when we need to feel bitterness, is also sweetened with purpose and objective. It's not just bitterness as an end in itself. So the sweet charosas that is used. Okay. Next step is 10. Step 10, korach. Korach is eating a sandwich of matzah and maror together. Now that we've experienced the humility of matzah and the bittul of matzah, and we've experienced also the pain of growth, we combine them together. We call this bittersweet. We combine the matzah's earthiness and bittul with the maror's bitterness, which is dipped in the sweet charosas. And essentially there's a time for each, but then there's a time for combining them together with total integration, a seamless experience. So we take our material lives, we're elevating it through sublimating into something spiritual, the matzah. We also taste the bitterness of change and shift, the pain of that, and all together into one seamless experience that produces tremendous growth and freedom. And then we look back and see, that was the process. So it's a process, the journey. So we've done now the 10 steps. We have 5 more steps to go. The 11th step is, of course, maybe the most popular one. It's called Shulchan Aruch, eating the festive meal. But now we don't eat a regular meal. It's a regular meal in the sense that it's a meal as all meals, but it's coming after 10 steps of tremendous processing. And I'm being brief. Obviously, if someone really elaborates on it all, it can turn into an unbelievable experience. So here we call it do it. This is called now execution. After all these preparations and after the mindsets and the meditations and the different actions that we did, now comes acting on it. Eat a meal in a more refined way than you've ever eaten it. Because you've now experienced a meal is a physical meal, it's material. But you're eating it with spiritual vitality. It's saturated with a spiritual focus and message. So after the first steps, which also correspond to the 10 sfirot, if you're familiar with the 10 spiritual dimensions of energy, that are really like the DNA of all of existence, and we've trained to integrate spiritual freedom into our material lives, we're now ready for the real test, the first real test, eating a meal with family, with guests, in a new way, permeated with a sense of higher purpose. Remember, when we go back to our lives, so to speak, after Passover, we're going to be eating meals. We're going to be doing a lot of mundane things. But you want it to now be infused with the transcendent experience and freedom of Passover. That's the key to the future. We'll talk about that at the end. So all this are steps that lead us there. We now go to step 12. After the meal, there's tzofen. We eat the afikomen. The afikomen is part of the matzah that was broken in step 4. So we eat a larger part. It's called eating the afikomen, and this we use the word reveal. We're starting now to reveal the superconscious energies, deeper things. In Hebrew, the word tzofen is step 12. Tzofen means hidden. After we've eaten a complete meal as free people, a material meal saturated, eaten in a spiritual fashion and refined way, we have now the power to go deeper, which leads us to the last steps, which is now revealing deeper levels within our soul. Because what you've done is, from the beginning, you've separated, you've sanctified, and you've elevated your material life. So now we've reached a deeper spiritual state, and this is what we do now. We start revealing that which is hidden and unconscious, the superconscious within ourselves and those around us. Follow that comes Berach, step 13. The grace, reciting grace after the meal. We're drawing down now. We're drawing down. That's what Berach means. To bless means to draw down, to manifest. Gives us the power to ensure that the meal, which is symbolic of all our material experiences, as we mentioned, will yield the spiritual energy that lies within its divine sparks. It means to draw down spirituality into this physical world. We want it to be drawn down. Not just for us to elevate up there, but to draw down. Leading to step 14, Hallel. Reciting psalms of praise. And here we'll call it let go. Psalms of praise, gratitude. Remembering and focusing on the things that, the blessings in our lives. And we have much to have gratitude for. So after everything we have done in our power to achieve freedom, Hallel, through the words of praise, we place ourselves in God's hands and say, you have blessed us with so many gifts, with family, with gifts, with miracles in Israel, miracles everywhere around the world, miracle of life itself, of health. We surrender in a sense, and we allow ourselves to be embraced. That whatever we cannot do on our own, we're asking God to do for us. So this is a very specific step. So we've moved from the conscious to the superconscious, and now we're asking, please, fill in the gaps, that which we have not been able to do, or that which was not in our immediate power to do. Which leads us to the conclusion of step 15, Nirtza. Nirtza is interesting, is not a step at all. Nothing is done. It's the end. It's God's promise to accept our service. We'll call it redemption. Unlike the previous 14 steps, this last and final step does not manifest itself in any prayer or action. We have reached a point that transcends words and praise. We've done everything we can, both in ourselves, in reaching upward, in asking God to help us, the praise. After we have completed our Seder service, we are accepted favorably. Nirtza means to be accepted favorably. Total redemption, which is like essentially the emergence of a new state of being. Not that was dependent on 14 steps before, that you did make your effort, but now it's the emergence of this 15th step. And with that, we're finally ready for our personal and global redemption, which is why right after that, at the end, we say, next year, L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. So my friends, these are 15 steps. The more you immerse yourself, the more you can involve yourself, and you don't have to do them all perfectly. Nobody does it perfectly. But it puts an emphasis Not on just ritual that's disconnected, but personalizing it. Making it engaging, whether you're hosting a Seder, whether you are a guest at a Seder. These can help you and anyone around you to grow in new ways. And we know we all need that type of growth. And as I said before, change happens when you initiate change. Change breeds change. Nothing changes, nothing changes. If you think what you thought, and you say what you said, and you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. It's a mathematical certainty. The Seder is all meant to be manishtana. Why is this night different? Differences. We make a change. We shift. You shift something on action, there's always going to be a reaction. That is the key thing to remember. And may this Passover actually indeed bring you greater personal transcendence, redemption, freedom from whatever those trappings are, which you should definitely focus on at the beginning of the Seder. What are the things you want to get beyond? It's always a good idea to keep focused. What are things that you want to get rid of? What addictions, what habits, what bad past, anything you want to free yourself and use this. So may this indeed bring that type of personal redemption, global redemption, universal redemption, and especially may I say a prayer for the Jews, the Jewish people in the Holy Land who are in a situation where they have enemies that want to hurt them. And they're part of us and we're part of them. May God protect them, protect the soldiers, the military who are sacrificing their lives. God should protect you Jews everywhere, all people everywhere, and finally to a total victory and redemption, freedom of the hostages, a freedom of all people that are innocent and deserve a beautiful, calm, and peaceful life forever and ever. Thank you for listening. This has been Simon Jacobson doing the 15 steps and for the Passover Seder. I hope it's helpful to you, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Love to hear after Passover or whatever you'd like. Share what happened, your experiences, your feedback. Please share this with others. Subscribe to our offerings. Subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. And please know that I'm here for you, and I hope that we can together bring real change, positive change, and growth and meaning to this world. Thank you. Happy Passover, a freeing, liberating, emancipating, and meaningful holiday.